Good morning and welcome to this Zoom worship service of the Unitarian Universalist Church of Studio City. My name is Terry Hassman-Paulin, and along with Bonnie Peroni, I serve as co-secretary of the board. I use the pronouns she, her, and hers. I welcome you if this is your first Zoom service with our church, if you've been attending for several months, or if you've been attending this church for years. Everyone of goodwill is welcome within our community. Since we've all lived through one of the most tumultuous weeks in our nation's history, we find that we need the support of one another more than ever. Of course, we recognize that together we are living through a pandemic that has changed our lives dramatically. Further, we are moving through a week when we have little idea of what will happen from day to day in our nation's capital. So, who are we? At the Unitarian Universalist Church of Studio City, we strive to be an inclusive congregation, welcoming all people of goodwill. We honor diversity in religious beliefs and work together for a society of fairness and justice. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe that we need not think alike to love alike. We are people of many beliefs and backgrounds, people with a religious background, people with none, people who believe in a God, people who don't, and people who just let the mystery be. Today, at a time when you might be feeling somewhat isolated and confused, maybe angry, we offer you the support of community. We'll be talking today about opportunities to volunteer on church committees. If you're feeling disconnected and fragmented right now, then we do have at least one solution. Get involved. Lead or join a committee. Contribute your time and talent to a church group that speaks to your passions. By coming together with other members of this church community, you're helping many, including yourself. You're opening up new connections that will lead on to more satisfaction and a feeling of self-worth. Give it a try. And now I have 3 important announcements. First, please mark your calendars for Sunday, January 24th. The Welcoming Congregation Committee will have a Zoom meeting right after the worship service to discuss what is known as the iceberg model and how it applies to our church. The iceberg model was introduced in Module 5 of the Transforming Heart series of videos. Everyone is invited to join the discussion, even if you haven't seen the video. And if you'd like more information, go to our website and look in our weekly bulletin. Second announcement. Today at 12:30, there will be an RE sandwich making and cookie baking project from the homes of the RE students and their parents. And Nicole will put the link in the chat box. So please check the chat box if you are an RE student and you feel like making some cookies today and sandwiches. Also, after the service today, immediately after the service, all newcomers are invited to a breakout room for a friendly conversation with the minister. You'll get a real welcome. After the service, just raise your hand and you'll be put into this breakout room. If you were here, we were meeting in person, we would all get together and be drinking coffee and having donuts, but today we're just going to have a breakout room for you. Again, welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Studio City. We're so glad that you decided to Zoom by this morning.
Good morning. Earlier this week when Hannah asked me if I wanted to light a candle, I said, oh, sure, no problem. And then, of course, this week unfolded, as we all know that it did. And so there's two things that sort of came to me in lighting this candle today. And first, when I watched those images of those white supremacists in DC this week, you know, I was horrified by many of the images, but there were two images that struck me in particular. One was the image of the man with the Confederate flag, and the other image was the image of the noose hanging on the structure. And I realized how horrified I was. And I realized that horrified me, then how traumatizing that was for Black and Brown folks in our country. And oops, sorry, a little background stuff happening there. And so I'd like this candle and acknowledgement of that trauma for those folks, and the acknowledgement of the work that we all need to do for that. And then the other reason I want to light the candle today is there was this amazing victory in Georgia that we still need to remember and acknowledge, and the Stacey Abrams and the many Black women that helped her with that victory. So I light this chalice candle in honor of those women.
Thank you, Barbara, for lighting our chalice this morning. Our call to worship is by Sadi, who is a 12th or 13th century Persian poet. This is called To Serve the People. To worship God is nothing other than to serve the people. It does not need rosaries, prayer carpets, or robes. All peoples are members of the same body, created from one essence. If fate brings suffering to one member, the others cannot stay at rest. It is a sacred time and a sacred virtual space. Let's begin our sacred time together in song with our first hymn.
From the light of days remembered burns a beacon bright and clear, guiding hands and hearts and spirits into faith set free from fear. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and the future can begin. From the stories of our living brings a song both brave and free, calling pilgrims still to witness to the life of liberty. When the fire of commitment sets our mind and soul ablaze, when our hunger and our passion meet to call us on our way, when we live with deep assurance of the flame that burns within, then our promise finds fulfillment and our future can begin. From the dreams of youthful vision comes a new prophetic voice, which demands a deeper justice built
And now please join me in reading the words of our covenant in unison. Love is the spirit of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, thus do we covenant. And our doxology. And for our time for all ages today, we're doing volunteer appreciation today and talking about being of service. And Terry mentioned it earlier. I want to highlight one of our newer committee chairs, that of religious exploration for our children and youth, Mrs. Nicole Thibodeau. Nicole has really risen to the occasion in the last several months. She signed on not too long after the pandemic began. And today, as Terry mentioned, is our monthly sandwich making Sunday, when 5 families each make 20 sandwiches on Zoom all together for the homeless, then deliver them to church, which then get delivered to the North Hollywood Interfaith Food Pantry, which then of course get dispersed to our homeless in the San Fernando Valley tomorrow. So even though they only want a quota of 100 sandwiches, anyone can hop on and bake any kind of cookies as well. There's no quota for cookies. We can make as many cookies as we want. So come one, come all. It is a time for all ages, but it's especially for our families, to give children and youth a way to connect to our community and our mission. So I'm really proud of the families and our church for keeping up this volunteer service, even in the pandemic. This program was started at least 5 years ago by member Sue Wachowski. And Nicole is also spearheading the 8th principal curriculum about dismantling white supremacy in our congregation and beyond. And we'll be talking much more about that next week, when the whole service is dedicated to the 8th principle. So thank you, Nicole, and perhaps belatedly welcome aboard, and keep up the great work. So moving on in the service, I'm balancing 2 competing topics today: the call of volunteer service and the clarion call of democracy. It's the time of year when we usually do a big volunteer recruitment drive, as well as appreciation. But I can't ignore the incredible events that took place in our nation's capital this week any less than the rest of us can. So I'm tying them together in the sermon. But first, I wonder how many of you have come across this since Wednesday, a short video that went viral, hashtag guy on porch. I can't show the video because it's full of expletives. I try to keep things civilized in our sacred time and space, virtual or not. But if you haven't seen it already, it should be easy to find by keywords, guy on porch. Here, however, is an article about it from the Washington Post I want to share. And later in the sermon, I'll explain my personal connection to Mr. Tracy. Just a sec, let me pull it up. Okay, so yes, this came out January 8th. And it's called "The Trump Mom Gave Us Hashtag Guy on Porch and Hashtag Woman in Car, The Real Americans." Peter Tracy, a 60-year-old white lawyer in DC, admits he was triggered. "I went out on the porch and just let them have it," Tracy said, describing his emotional outburst at supporters of President Trump on Wednesday. a profane, guttural lament for the tumult in our city and our nation. Get out of town, expletive, treasonous pieces of expletive. The lawyer screamed from his wrought iron townhouse porch at the mob carrying Trump flags down his Northwest Washington street. And Shantia Humphreys couldn't believe her eyes when she saw who was saying exactly what she was quietly thinking. She was tired. The exhaustion familiar to many Black Americans suffering through a brutal year settled in her bones as she sat in her car at a stoplight, driving a colleague home after another weird COVID-19 workday, topped off with the Trump mob walking right past her car. She perked up a bit when she heard residents yelling at the invaders. There was another woman screaming outside her window, she said to me later. Then, when I turned to the opposite sides of the street, Peter drew my attention because he was just going off. Wait, you're white. I agreed with everything he was saying. It was all true. I know, they're really destroying our city, she called out to Tracy from her driver's side window in an exchange recorded by Norwegian journalist Veronica Westhren and her film crew, who happened to be on the block when Tracy reached his boiling point. Tracy responded to Humphreys, they're destroying the expletive city, and it's like nobody gives an expletive. Humphreys was close to her own home in a fast gentrifying part of town, one that features an of-the-moment cidery and Pinkstos restaurant, yet still has porch-sitting grandmothers who are third-generation Black Washingtonians. It's a street that doesn't always get close to the tourist and political action of DC. So it was surprising to both of them when Trump supporters marched down the street. I saw the way that people of color, our neighbors of color, were put down by police brutally during the protests this summer, Tracy told me later. We all have our triggering issues, and just seeing those flags, the people coming into a city where we respect each other's diversity and they have none of that, that was it for me. And Humphreys was stunned that it was this 60-year-old white man speaking her truth, their truth. If that were Black Lives Matter, they'd have tanks rolling down Pennsylvania Avenue, Tracy yelled back to Humphreys, to everyone on the street, to a world that may not see the absurdity of what was happening in the nation's capital. But they let these expletive take over the expletive capital, he said, using a racial pejorative to describe the predominantly white Trump supporters in town, which made Humphreys laugh out loud. Humphreys, 34, had spent some days at the Black Lives Matter protests this summer, tense events with rows of police and battle rattle and riot shields. And she was surprised. That porch guy understood how that felt to her. Seeing Trump supporters everywhere in her city, Trump flags and Confederate battle flags without a Humvee or a phalanx of police and riot gear in sight. On the video, Humphreys told Tracy he'd made her teary-eyed, and you can hear Tracy going on in the background as she wiped at her cheeks, first with her fingers, then with the back of her hand. We'd die, she said, if she or any Black Lives Matter protesters tried to storm the Capitol building. The next day, Humphreys told me she really was crying. It did make me tear up, she said, how he was really upset too. He got it. I was like, damn, he understands. The next morning, after the exchange had gone viral on social media, it now has more than 1 million views, and Tracy, who is not on social media, became hashtag guy on porch. Tracy said he had no regrets. Well, maybe one. I could have professed it a little less profanely, he said when we talked on the phone. Tracy moved to DC from Delaware 22 years ago and loves the vibrant diversity of the city. And just about anyone who lives in DC full-time is well aware of the stubborn racism woven into daily life. On Thursday morning, he still didn't know Humphrey's name or who she was, and Humphreys didn't know who he was. People kept asking me for the cross streets because they wanted to send him a beer or some gift, Humphreys told me. Her friends around DC tagged her on the video as soon as they saw it. And she wanted to tell Tracy personally. So I went to Walmart and got him a bottle of wine, not the $3 kind, Humphrey said. I bought him the $9 one. And she drove back to the street and found his red brick townhouse and knocked on the door. She squealed when they met and they took selfies. He invited her in and they talked for almost 2 hours. It's like, I think we made the energy brighter. She said, I'm glad that we went viral for something good because on that day, no one else really spoke up. There were no other protesters outside. The mayor asked DC to stay home. We were the only ones speaking up that day against the people walking on our street in our city. America has already begun the healing revolution on city streets, in neighborhoods, in living rooms, and on social media. No riot needed. And thus ends our reading. So now at the center of our service and the center of our lives, let us take time to bear witness to what is in the center of our hearts. It's been one heck of a week. We all bring feelings of joy or sorrow, memory or hopes to the service this morning. Let's bear witness to that by lighting a candle or typing your joy or sorrow in the chat. And today our reader will be Aviva Heston.
Good morning. When a sorrow is shared, it's lessened, and when a joy is shared, it's multiplied. In that spirit, Greg Golden has a sorrow. He says he has just learned that during his brief volunteer effort last Friday at the North Hollywood Interfaith Food Pantry, one of the other volunteers had been near his wife, and his wife tested positive for COVID that day. By the time I learned of this, I had been exposed to him and Paula had been exposed to me. The joy is that none of us feels any symptoms yet. Please keep your prayers open. The Peroni share a joy. Bonnie is proud to be from Georgia. I did a small amount of support of the brave and tireless work done by the Black women of my home state. It is their work and our support that will stand against the hate, fear, and destruction that is rising up yet again against truth, fairness, and justice. Terry and Jean share a joy. Congratulations to Antoinette Jolly and Peter for the Together in the Struggle rally, which was held last night for 3 hours. It was fantastic. Thank you. Cheryl Kaplow shares a joy. My lovely mother had her 92nd birthday on Thursday, and for her birthday, she was blessed with a COVID vaccine. What strange world we are currently living in. She never stops amazing me with the way she has coped with the challenges thrown at her during her long life. John shares a joy that my sister, a nurse in Texas, received her second COVID vaccine on Friday. A disappointment that her husband, a teacher, has not yet been scheduled to receive the vaccine. John and Cynthia share a sorrow from John. Sad that Cynthia has been laid low with illness for 5 weeks, praying for some lasting relief soon. She tested negative for COVID, seems like a lupus flare. Please send healing vibes. Jim Wallace shares a joy. Reverend Dr. Senator Warnock, an intelligent, ethical person in the Senate. Who could imagine it? Yay. Joyce Fiddler shares a joy. Thanks to Bonnie and all the folks who helped Georgia go blue. Diane Rowland shares a sorrow that my right primary shoulder has been in extreme pain for a few days. I assume rotator cuff tendonitis. Could not make doctor's appointment on the weekend at SCOI. Of course, sorrow for what happened at the Capitol. Joy that it will soon be Biden, and I hope nothing else goes down with the Trump mob at his inauguration. Joy that we got the Senate. Go Georgia. Antoinette shares a joy. Jolly is glad that the most recent national events are waking more Americans to the warning bells ringing louder and louder. Some are just learning what others have known for long, but what is important is that we are together. And I will share a sorrow. My mother has been gone for 30 years now, and her best friend died this week. She was like an honorary aunt to me, and our family spent lots and lots, many, many holidays together and many experiences. And she was almost 97 years old, and Thelma died of COVID. And we end by honoring, oh, there might be one more. Yes, Austin has shared his sorrow that he feels bad for Pence, Vice President Pence. And we end by honoring all the joys and sorrows kept in the silent sanctuary of our hearts. May we all be warmed in the embrace of our community.
Thank you, Aviva. I invite everyone to join me in a spirit of prayer at this time. Afterwards, we'll have a full minute of meditative silence and sing our responsive hymn just after that. Our prayer today is by Norman Cousins, and it is called "The Body is Humankind." I am a single cell in a body of 4 billion cells. The body is humankind. I am a single cell. My needs are individual, but they are not unique. I am interlocked with other human beings in the consequences of our actions, thoughts, and feelings. I will work for human unity and human peace, for a moral order in harmony with the order of the universe. Together we share the quest for a society of the whole equal to our needs. A society in which we need not live beneath our moral capacity, and in which justice has a life of its own. We are single cells in a body of 4 billion cells. The body is humankind. Amen. And now let us join in a period of communal silence.
shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand. We'll walk hand in hand someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we'll walk hand in hand someday. We shall all be free. We shall all be free. We shall all be free someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall all be free someday. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace. We shall live in peace someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall live in peace someday.
It's time for our weekly ritual of sharing our financial gifts. All of the programs and ministries of our beloved congregation are made possible by you, the churchgoers, members, and friends. We rely on personal donations more than ever during the pandemic. We encourage you to invite your family and friends to service, which is just a click away, so we can share our message more widely. Thank you so much for your ongoing generosity. The offering will now be gratefully received.
Clapping in 3, 1 and 2 and 3, and clap and clap and clap.
And now I wish to take a few moments to honor two outstanding volunteers who are outgoing as well as make a plug for filling these important volunteer roles and other seats that stand vacant at this time. We are mainly a volunteer-run organization. We like it this way because we provide meaningful ways for people to spend their time and give of their talents. It is a symbiotic enterprise. First, Cheryl Kaplow. And feel free to highlight these folks, Peter, if you wish. I know she's here somewhere. Cheryl Kaplow, who served as our communications chair for about 3.5 years. I love Cheryl. Week after week, she gave her greatest care and attention to editing our weekly e-newsletter, and she helped with the website in more ways than even I could say. She worked with webmasters and oversaw improvements. With her professional skills and knowledge as a marketing professional, she understood the importance of our public face and how the language we use can draw in newcomers. Everyone finds us via our website, and so I am very grateful for her eye to detail about how we can put our best foot forward and communicate as clearly as we can about who we are and the programs we offer. She's a wonderful editor and gave us many, many hours of her free time, many hours. Cheryl, you were a wonderful contribution to the church in this manner, and I hope the pandemic ends as soon as possible so you can enjoy singing in the choir again. Currently, we have a communications team with our admin, Claudia, and 2 other fantastic volunteers, Matt Sturry and Terry Hassman. We would love to have a chair, however, to take Cheryl's place. Anyone who has an eye for marketing or website design could help more newcomers find us so that we can positively affect people in our LA community, and we, the existing community, can benefit from the gifts of time and talent that newcomers so often bring to our community. It's a related role to our newcomers, to making our newcomers feel welcome once they do find us. That is the position of membership chair. Barbara Allen, whom I also love, who lit our chalice today, has served as membership chair for about 3 years. She had moved from the East Coast and had wonderful experience to bring from the UU church she attended there. She was drawn to the position because as a newcomer herself, she wanted to make sure new people felt as welcome as she wanted to feel. And that takes chutzpah. And Barbara took it on with much enthusiasm. Of course, it's much easier when church is in session and we're rubbing elbows and shaking hands and sharing hugs when we can personally welcome newcomers face to face. Barbara was especially adept at hospitality, often making homemade food for all kinds of events, whether it was for new to UU, social justice teach-ins, or our annual UU Sunday when we served up heaps of chili and cornbread. Now, as wonderful as Cheryl and Barbara have been at filling these roles, the cool thing about a congregation such as ours is there's no wrong or right way to fill the role. You don't have to be a great cook like Barbara is to be a membership chair. There's a lot of room for exploration and creativity as to where one might focus their energies and the things they might try or focus on. And this is pretty much true of all our committee chair positions. Currently, we lack a membership committee as well, meaning any help with membership would be fabulous. We certainly need creative thinkers for carrying out membership activities during the pandemic as we continue to worship online and at a distance. The other chairs we still need to fill, they are several. But I would stress today that most of all, we need also a chair for our caring team and a chair for stewardship and fundraising. The chairs organize meetings and agendas. The caring team works to reach out to members and friends who need just that, caring, whether that's to see how someone is doing after such things as losing a loved one, a job, a marriage, or any difficult challenge in life. They also provide rides and organize meals for people who want them. We send cards and make phone calls. This is direct service to our members and friends, and it's rewarding because it makes a difference. It really, truly does make a difference in people's lives, as well as strengthens our bonds of friendship. There are other open seats, and I'm more than happy to have a conversation with anyone about your options. Simply call me at the office or shoot me an email. And now for our musical offering today, we have a classic Nina Simone performance.
Ain't got no uncles, ain't got no love, ain't got no mind. I ain't got no country, ain't got no schooling, ain't got no friends, ain't got no nothing, ain't got no water, ain't got no air, ain't got no smoke, ain't got no ticket. Ain't got no water, ain't got no love, ain't got no faith, ain't got no God, ain't got no wine, ain't got no money, ain't got no faith, ain't got no God, ain't got no love. And what have I got? Why am I alive anyway? Yeah, what have I got? Nobody can take away. I got my hair, got my head, got my brains, got my head, got my eyes, got my nose, got my mouth. I got my sense. I got my arms, got my hands, got my fingers, got my legs, got my feet, got my toes, got my liver, got my blood, I've got life, I've got life, I've got a headache and toothache and bad times too like you. I got my hands, got my head, got my brains, got my ears, got my eyes, got my nose, got my mouth. I got my smile. I got my tongue, got my chin, got my neck, got my boobies, got my heart, got my soul, got my back. I got my sex. I got my arms, got my hands, got my fingers, got my legs, got my feet, got my toes, got my liver, got my blood. I got life. I got my freedom. Oh, I got
I picked that song because when I watched it, it made me cry. As we all know, Los Angeles is apparently the epicenter of the world, the worldwide pandemic at this time. If you have ties to the Latino community, it's been beyond awful. For example, I learned just yesterday that the organization that houses the studio I podcast out of, who's a partner organization of Pasadenans Organizing for Progress that I sit on the board of, that is the National Day Labor Organizing Network, or NDLON, they have pretty much all come down with COVID. I wasn't able to podcast on Friday because everyone who runs the place is sick. Further, my fellow board member Julieta just lost her father to COVID in Mexico last week, and her mother is sick with it as well in Mexico. It is breaking my heart how cruel this disease is and how much it has affected the Latinx community. It is deep powerlessness, I feel, as I see the salt of the earth in our LA community be so devastated by loss and tragedy, and not able even to be at the bedsides of loved ones as they are dying. And so the Nina Simone song puts things in perspective, I hope, for us all. No matter how bereft or deprived we may feel at times as we continue to be isolated from normal life, we do have homes, we do have food, we do have faith. Maybe even some of us have a God. Not to mention our bodies and our lives. When you are feeling blue, listen to that song to help remind you of all that we have and must cherish. As people are dying all around us, we should all be moved to consider what we can do. Given that we do have our lives, we do have our faculties, and some of us may have more free time than we know what to do with. If this describes you, I would nearly get on my knees to beg you to please consider taking on a volunteer role for our beloved community. This religious community to which you belong, and I know you hold dear. And make no mistake, I know you don't hold it dear because of me. I am merely the mouthpiece. That's my role, the leader that suggests what is important to consider, to dream, to actualize. No, you hold this community dear because of each other. It's like the call to worship and the prayer today, that image of cells in one body. I am a single cell in a body of 4 billion cells. The body is humankind. Well, each of you is a cell in a body of at least 150 members and friends, and the body is this congregation. And in the Sadi, to serve the people, the prayer I read, he says, all peoples are members of the same body, created from one essence. If fate brings suffering to one member, the others cannot stay at rest. We have been lucky so far that not one of us has died of COVID, though we certainly have family members and friends who have. But people are dying all around us, and we should not stay at rest. In this way, even if none of the church volunteer roles move you, then find something to do, some way to give of your no strings attached love and service to your wider LA community or whichever community you may hail from across the country. Donating food, donating blood, volunteering at a food bank, whatever it might be that you feel safe and comfortable doing. And as we saw in the chat from Greg Golden, volunteering at a food bank may not be safe, depending on your risk. But there is always financial support that can be given without leaving home. Food banks across the country are scrambling to meet the demand, so that is always a safe bet. You can also write letters to people in prison, letters of appreciation to doctors and nurses. Once you get in a creative frame of mind to serve the people, the sky's the limit. The call of service is a primary Unitarian Universalist value. We believe in deeds and not creeds. We believe in service and not sanctimony. We like to think outside the box and refuse to be penned inside any box. If you can help keep this Unitarian Universalist institution strong with your time and talent, then you are helping to keep this message strong in our community and in our wider world, so that the people who need to hear it can hear it and heed it, and find this course of worldly salvation that we offer. While that's probably about all that really needs to be said today, again, as your mouthpiece leader, I can't help but compare this call to service to the clarion call of democracy. It took me a few days to process and come out of shock after Wednesday's events in the Capitol. Yesterday, I called up my aunt and uncle and cousin who all live on Capitol Hill. We talked while they were making dinner. Both my aunt and uncle are in the field of law. My uncle Peter has served as dean and on faculty of the Georgetown Law School for decades now. And my Aunt Karen is also a United Church of Christ minister. They are the most liberal Christians, and we like to make the joke that UCC stands for Unitarians Considering Christ. Respectfully, of course, because I'm sure they consider themselves beyond considering. But the point is, they're very liberal, just like us. I'm like, so what do you all think about what happened? They liken the insurgents to being mentally ill, and I'm like, they can't all be mentally ill. I could be wrong about this, but I did hear at one point, I heard upwards of perhaps 350,000 Trump supporters showed up in DC last week. Deeply misguided, yes, I thought to myself. But their rage and frustration comes from somewhere, and somewhere very deep that can't just be likened to mental illness. I am not wishing to be an apologist here, but they too are among the millions of cells from one body, and that body is our country. They have been let down in lots of ways over centuries even. And personally, I would blame our public education system most of all, a system that has failed to teach basic principles of our democracy and our Constitution. I also blame our unspoken economic caste system that perpetuates poverty over countless generations, beginning with the so-called waste people that Britain exported here back in the 17th and 18th centuries. Their gripes are 300 to 400 years old. Does it excuse their behavior? Of course not. But the point is that we have to figure out how to move forward as one nation under one democracy. Do you remember what Rabbi Chaim said months ago at our Yom Kippur service back in September? Even these people, these deplorable Trumpers, while we shall hold them accountable with our law and order that Trump doesn't know the meaning of, even as he trumpeted the Nixon old tagline for months, law and order, even as we hold them accountable, even these people, we will have to find a way to forgive them. Even if that only entails listening to them and having some modicum of compassion for their motivations for which they were willing to both kill and die. I'm sure I've upset some people with my last paragraph. How could we possibly show any compassion for people who are racist, ignorant, gun-toting, and vile? For these crackers. Because we are one body. And this body needs to heal. This democracy, this economy, it needs to work for everyone, not just city dwellers, not just brown or yellow or black or white or red people, all of us, from the coal miners of Pennsylvania to the gig workers of LA. Most Trumpers did not rampage over our hallowed halls of Capitol Hill. Many of them are too poor to even consider a trip out of their hometown, let alone consider a trek across the country. Now, it is absolutely true that African Americans, the descendants of slaves who built the Capitol, have even more legitimate gripes of the last 400 years. They have endured a deeply entrenched culture of white supremacy all this time, and we will take a very good look at that next week for our entire Sunday topic. What I'm trying to drive home today is that we can't just chuck the so-called basket of deplorables out to sea like they heaved boxes of tea in Boston back in the day. We can't export our waste people like Britain did. If we don't find a way to meet the people's needs, to serve the people, all the people, the awful events we saw this week will keep happening, and they will get even more organized and more terrorizing and more deadly. We Unitarian Universalists like to talk about how radically inclusive we are. Well, that's what I'm driving at. The democratic experiment continues, and we will never be perfect. But we must strive for a democracy that works for as many people as possible, especially the poor, no matter what color they are. How do we bring this about? How do we make the call of democracy as clarion as possible for everyone, for every child that grows up in her arms, no matter what family they come from? We are the people, all members of the same body. Let me end by telling you that no, that's not the same Peter in the viral video. That is my Uncle Peter. But that man, Peter Tracy, is a friend of my aunt and uncle's. He goes to their church. And my aunt has been leading curriculum at this particular church for 4 years that focuses on white people coming to terms with their unconscious racism. This is liberal religious programming that specifically works to unpack racism, unpack white supremacy, and destroy it. And when they talked the other day, Peter Tracy mentioned that it was that program that my aunt led that was, in his words, a real turning point in his thinking about race and racism. So, way to go, Karen, my beloved aunt and colleague. It just goes to show that churches and religious institutions who take on the extremely challenging work of dismantling racism in our racist American society can make a difference. So can we, and so will we. To be continued. God bless this community of worship, and God bless America. In all our confusion, in all our good but effed up intentions, and in our undying commitment to serve a more just, healthy, and peaceful world. And now let us sing our last hymn, We Would Be One. And don't forget our newcomers and anyone else, if you'd like to join a separate room just after our benediction, raise your hand. A final benediction does indeed conclude our service. For those who seek God, may your God go with you. For those who embrace life, may life return your affection. And for those who seek a better path, may you find that path and the courage to take it step by step by step. Amen.